I recorded this several months ago when the Q&A was obviously not 4 months plus old. This was recorded probably around July, August. Regardless, it was a few months ago, so some things are outdated, like Need for Speed Unbound wasn't revealed this time, for example. So just keep that in mind when you watch the video. I also only answered some questions from specific people, but not all of them, so just keep that in mind if your question wasn't answered. Hey guys, Jake here, and today I'm going to be answering the questions I did for my Q&A for 6,000 subscribers. Sister Zara has two questions. One, what are your thoughts on Formula 1 22, being both the game and the season itself? The game I have not played, but from what I can tell, I think they made some strange decisions. I think gutting historic F1 cars for the supercars is a terrible decision. I think it's trying to make the game look a little bit more flashy on the outside, to more the mainstream audience, I guess, because they'll notice supercars more than they'll notice older Formula 1 cars. The supercars feature is just putting them somewhere where, in my opinion, they just don't belong. The season itself, however, I don't really follow Formula 1 much, but in the Fastlane Discord server, we have a motorsports chat, and that's pretty much where I keep up to date with that kind of stuff. I find the difference in Lewis Hamilton's performance from the last few seasons to this season pretty surprising. Zhou's crash also made me think a lot about the distance between, say, the tire wall and the actual gate, sort of guardrail that the crowd and the spectators have. Obviously, with that viral photo of his crash just sitting in between those walls, made me think a lot about that. I think the gap between those two definitely could be widened. Fast and 5 asks, what is your favorite Codemasters game? This one is probably a tie between Grid 1 and Dirt 2. I might have to edge out Dirt 2 just a little bit, but overall I think both of them are pretty close. UN_legend asks, when did you start playing racing games and why do you still play them? I started playing racing games when I was about 5 to 6 years old. My first proper racing game from what I can recall is actually Need for Speed Most Wanted, back on my hand-me-down Windows XP computer. I still play racing games today because I'm simply just interested in them. The decline in quality for some franchises and titles recently in the genre isn't going to deflate my interest in the racing game genre. Tashin asks, 1. What do you think about the current state of the racing game genre as a whole? There's really two sides to look at that. If you're a fan of arcade racers, then things are in a really strange state right now. But if you're a fan of sim racing, this is the best it's ever been. Sim racing has an incredible amount of variety right now, from Assetto Corsa and Competizione, Automobilista 1 and 2, Race Room, R-Factor 2, some of y'all may still play Project Cars 2, and much more. Meanwhile, for arcade racing, things have been in a weird state I think ever since the PS4 and Xbox One launched. Ever since then, there's only like one solid title per year or nothing at all. I think 2014 was the last year we got multiple solid titles, being The Crew 1, Drive Club, and Forza Horizon 2. And for a while, we were getting really bad games back to back, such as Forza Motorsport 7 to Need for Speed Payback to The Crew 2, all within the span of 6 months. Lots of franchises from the 7th gen and 6th gen days have died out as well, being Burnout, MotorStorm, Ridge Racer, Midnight Club, and more. This leads to a lot less variety in the arcade racing space. And I think ever since Need for Speed Payback released, we've been getting worse games with less features and lower quantity. Saying that the 8th generation of consoles sucked for racing games is an easy statement to make, but there's a lot of things that led to that. Lots of franchises being absent, Need for Speed declining horribly, Forza Motorsport declining horribly, Gran Turismo being absent and releasing with a spin-off title. So back to my summary. If you're a fan of sim racing, it's been great, and if you're a fan of arcade racing, it's been really, really strange. Darkfighter asks 3 questions. 1. Do you think EA should make a new engine ad specifically for Need for Speed games? That is a hard one to tell. A lot of people like to blame the issues of the Ghost developed Need for Speed games on the Frostbite engine. I wouldn't be surprised if Frostbite may make some things more difficult or may play into an issue or two, but I'm not sure if it's causing the majority of problems with the current Need for Speed titles. I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to think it's Ghost that's causing the problems. So I would really have to see how Criterion handles Need for Speed with the current engine to really make a proper statement on that. Question 2. Do you think EA should make a new free-to-play Need for Speed like Need for Speed World, but with the maps of Palm City and all the Need for Speed games that were on the Frostbite engine? This is an interesting question, and it's one that is actually currently half true. The new Need for Speed mobile game that's headed for the Asian markets is actually almost exactly this. It's a free-to-play online open world game, but set in Palm City. So far, it doesn't seem to have the other recent Need for Speed maps, but just Palm City. If another developer got their hands on it, it wasn't put on Criterion or anything, obviously I don't think it would be, then I think it might be a good idea, but it'd be a shame to see it locked only to the Asian market again. And question 3, are motorcycles in Need for Speed a good idea? Right now, I would say no. Motorcycles in games like Midnight Club and Project Gotham Racing I think are quite cool. We just need a game that works, unlike every single Ghost game. If Need for Speed actually gets their game back together, then I think it could be an interesting addition. Alex asks, do you remember the team rules? Unfortunately, yes. Yes, I do. Log Drive has 5 questions. I'll only be answering 4 since I've answered the third one in a previous comment. Question 1 being, what fictional tracks from older Forza Motorsport games would you like to see in the new Forza Motorsport? My number 1 has to be Camino de Viejo, with its alternate routes and forms, being Iberia Test Track and Ladera Test Track. All of these 3 tracks combined to make one big giant circuit, and if those count as 3, then I'm fine with it because I'm a big fan of all 3 tracks. Sunset Peninsula, even though it's basically Daytona, I'd really like to see it back, as I've always liked it more than Daytona's layout. Fujimi Kaido is also an obvious want. I'm not going to be drifting on it, but driving slower cars is a lot of fun on Fujimi. I think Sedona Raceway would also be a cool one with the way it integrated the oval into the outer track, and especially with the way they made all the red rocks look. Kind of reminds me of Red Rock from Forza Horizon 1, but turned into a racetrack. But I think with the current technology and what they're able to do in games like Horizon 5 with the rocks, imagine how Sedona would look today. I think that would be really, really cool. The next question is, what do you think the future of the Dirt and Grid series look like? Dirt is a weird one. I can't see the main series continuing, but I can't see Dirt Rally continuing in the form of the WRC branding. I can imagine it just being called EA Sports WRC, but it's essentially Dirt Rally 3. But that also makes you ask if EA would want them to water down the physics and simulation to make it appeal a bit more, kind of like the Formula 1 series does. Grid is also a weird one. I really like Grid Legends, but I'm not sure if EA does because of the terrible, terrible release timing it got. I really wish it released a week after Gran Turismo 7 came out to absolutely humiliate the game if it would have released when GT7 was having that horrible downtime. Have I ever been to any type of race? I'm assuming you mean a proper motorsport event, and no, I actually haven't, but I would like to go to one someday. Circuit of the Americas isn't too far away from here. And the last question, question 5, what was your favorite song from Forza Horizon 3? Now this is what you call the impossible question. I'm just gonna put all these on the screen. You pick one. Game Music TV, or Game Over Tapes, or Faku, or Xbox One Rebooter asks, what's your favorite TV show / movie? I'm gonna go for the movie one on this one and say I have a huge soft spot for Home Alone 2. Call me crazy. Question number 2. What's the best racing game of all time in your opinion? If I truly had to pick one, I would say Gran Turismo 4. But ideally, I would pick 2, being the best sim or simcade, and then being the best arcade racer, which therefore I would pick Gran Turismo 4 and Burnout Paradise. Question number 3, what are the best 3 albums of the last decade in your opinion? And I'm more so thinking about this in a way of my 3 favorites and not the 3 objectively best, if you really want to call it that. But I'll have to say The Bones of What You Believe by Churches, Malibu by Anderson .Paak, and No Pressure by Logic. And the last question, Final Boss of Racing Games Part 2, when? I have the entire script for the intro planned out. We have the hardware needed to do the video, both of us. I don't know if Josh has it anymore, but at least last time I checked, we both had the hardware available. We just need to stop being lazy and actually get it set up and do it. Yugen asks, would you consider making this channel if your first exposure to the racing genre is based on the games of today rather than the games of less than 20 years ago? This is an extremely interesting question. It has to do with the our age-gen racing games lacking kind of question. That is a very, very interesting one, but I would probably have to say yes. I think it would eventually come down to a yes, because even if I wasn't a fan of the quality of current titles, I don't think a kid that was my age growing up now would necessarily notice some of the problems. And plus, you could always come back and play older titles later and maybe find some interesting things there. I mean, what the kids are playing today isn't really all that bad. It's only been the last 5 years that I think have been really weak, specifically for arcade racing games, with the streak of just a hot pile of garbage each year for 4 years in a row being Payback, The Crew 2, Grid 2019, and Dirt 5. But that's a very interesting question. NFS Beast, thank you for being subscribed for so long by the way, has 3 questions, but I'll be skipping the first one as I've already answered that in a previous comment. Question 1 being, what is your favorite platform to play games on? Currently, right now, I have to say it's between my PC and my Nintendo Switch, for completely different reasons. On PC, I've started to emulate a lot more games, so I'm able to record higher quality footage, and just the fact that I could play so many different generations and different types of games on one system is really cool. I can go from playing a GameCube game to playing Forza Horizon 5 right afterward. Things can go wrong on PC, like older games breaking, or not being able to set up emulators right, etc. But that's kind of the good and the bad of PC gaming. You can do anything you want, but anything you want to do could also go wrong. But regardless, I'm a big fan of the PC platform, and it's what I play most games on nowadays. But on the other opposite hand is the Nintendo Switch. I've owned this since April of 2020, and I bought it for Animal Crossing because that game looked interesting to me since I liked kind of like city, town building kind of stuff, and I wanted to play that. And I assumed that I was gonna buy the Switch, and then I was gonna play that, maybe get a couple multi-plat games, maybe try one more exclusive, and that would be it'd be like a cool handheld to have some games on the side for. But I ended up dumping a crazy amount of money into the system's exclusives. But on top of the exclusives, the Switch feels like a console that's actually worth owning for the console itself. The Steam Deck doesn't even do all the things the Switch does, like the instant 2-player multiplayer of being able to slide the Joy-Cons off. And the Switch OLED screen is actually much better than the Steam Deck's. Not that the Steam Deck isn't cool, but the Switch I think is actually a system worth owning on its own. It has its cons, like not being able to export save data. Backwards compatibility could be a lot better, etc. But I've had a really good experience with my Switch, and it's by far my favorite console of the 8th generation. And question 2, will you miss EA Ghost now that they will never make another Need for Speed game ever again? My answer to that is definitely no. The day that they were announced to be shelved was a day I was really glad about the franchise. Now, of course, the new Criterion hasn't proven themselves yet, but the fact that EA knowed that they couldn't find talent in Sweden, and that therefore was affecting the quality of the games, shows that they actually care about the franchise. And Ghost, like I said earlier, I think started the dark age of Need for Speed that we are currently in. No other AAA game that I've played has had the low level of quality and the strange issues that come with Ghost's titles. The lack of being able to stay in one direction, the immense amount of physics bugs, the mediocre handling in nearly all the games, lacking online multiplayer, and much more make Ghost's Need for Speed titles a stain on the franchise in my opinion, even though I enjoyed Need for Speed 2015 and some aspects of Heat. And War, sorry if I mispronounced your name, asks, what are your thoughts on the last Nikon Direct and the fact that they showed no gameplay of TDUSD until now? Well, even then that wasn't really gameplay, but if you want to know my thoughts, I won't tell you, but I'll show you. There's a game.
911R!
Let's go!
Yes, 911R!
Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown.
Oh
Together,
god.
we
That's
drive.
it?
That's it.
That's not the whole
that it?
trailer though. Fuck!
Oh
Guys,
my
please,
god!
gameplay.
Oh my.
Wait,
Fuck
What is-
off.
wait,
what
I'm
is
not gonna
this?
watch this. I'm not
Bro,
gonna watch
that's it,
this.
really?
Fuck off.
Wait, that's
Are you
it.
serious?
And they literally show a Terminator game right after.
Bro,
I'm done with this.
I have no one or
Of
two left.
course.
most
Nacon.
disappointing.
Was that actually it?
Gamer_3DH asks 2 questions. 1. Out of all Need for Speed games Ghost made, which one is your favorite? Easily, Need for Speed 2015. While the handling was completely busted and the cops were weak, I still found the game to be enjoyable, and I feel like the game had much more of a clear direction than Payback and Heat did. Heat, while it has better handling and cops, I think is a much worse overall experience. I've had my fun on it, but I think 2015 is the better game. Rivals was quite poor, and we don't talk about Payback. Question 2, was Need for Speed Undercover underrated? Absolutely not. I think that game deserves all the criticism it gets and then some. The handling is poor, the graphics are poor, there is no real way to tell what you're actually doing in the story, the progression makes no sense as you can just hit tab or whatever controller button you hit just to go to the next race, there's no reason to explore the open world, the cops are pretty forgettable, and I really just can't understand why someone would actually believe Undercover is an underrated title. Is there enjoyment to get out of it? Sure. Is it better than Payback? Sure. But that really isn't saying much. Sniper Dude asks 2 questions. Question 1, what is your favorite video? My favorite video on YouTube or my favorite video I've made? As for favorite video I made, my top 3 have to be Why I Hate Gran Turismo 5, the final boss of racing games, and my 2021 April Fool's video. The first 2 took quite a while to make, but my April Fool's video, I made that in like 2.5 days. I still can't believe I made that video in that short amount of time, especially with all the crap I had to do with the Discord call. As for question 2, my favorite game if I were evil, Payback. The Avengers 44 has 2 questions. Question 1 being, what game genres do you enjoy aside from racing games? Over the years, I've enjoyed a couple shooters such as Overwatch and Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Those 2 I've clocked up a ton of hours on over the years, but I also tend to like some 3D and 2D platformers. I mainly play some of the Nintendo stuff, not that I'm closed off to other stuff, but the Nintendo stuff is mainly where I've discovered more of the platformer style games. I'm a big fan of the Paper Mario series, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself an RPG fan. Sorry if I butchered your name, but Huash Young asks, do you think the influence of the latter Horizon games is good or bad for the racing game genre in general? I do think some racing game franchises have suffered from trying to be like Forza Horizon. I think The Crew turned from great to garbage from The Crew 1 to Crew 2. And Need for Speed Payback, in my opinion, was spread thin by trying to include off-road, not only in terms of the vehicle class, making a new handling model for it, but also sacrificing so much space in the map for, honestly, a really mediocre off-road experience. In terms of things like graphics, handling, and physics, I think it's good that Horizon has raised the bar, but I don't think every racing game should try to be like Forza Horizon, and I think that's where some franchises are really falling right now. FMecha asks, what are your thoughts on annual motorsports games such as F1, NASCAR, MotoGP, etc.? First, I ended up thinking about that sports games seems like the kind of games that should be in the live service model. That way you don't have to make a new game every single time to play newer content, and there's also not the risk of having to go back and play an older game to access the older content. But at the same time, if it was live service, they could lose the rights to a specific thing, and now something that you could play in the game is not there anymore. Like the historic F1 cars not being in F122 in place of supercars. Imagine if that was live service, and now you'd have to go back to F1 2012 or 2013 if you wanted to drive older F1 cars. Clutch asks a simple question, what's your favorite game? I kind of have a tie on this one. If you were to ask me my favorite multiplayer game, I say Overwatch. And if you were to ask me my favorite single player game, I would say Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. As for racing games, I pick Gran Turismo 4 overall, but if I had to put it up in sections, I put Gran Turismo 4 as Best Simcade and Burnout Paradise as Best Arcade. Fearsome Token says, Need for Speed Rivals was misunderstood. It wasn't a normal open world arcade racer. It was probably the first battle royale arcade racing game, and it was pretty good in my opinion. What's your take on that? Just because something is not as liked as you want it to be, or you liked it more than other people did, doesn't mean it was misunderstood. People didn't like Rivals for a variety of reasons. That being that the cops were extremely aggressive. You couldn't really free roam. The game was extremely chaotic. The PC port was busted, and the game was extremely buggy on all platforms, but especially at launch. If you want my take on whether I think Rivals is misunderstood or not, I absolutely don't think it is. If you want my take on the game overall, I don't think it's very good, and it's in my bottom 3 Need for Speed games. Before I played Payback and Undercover, I thought it was the worst in the entire franchise. In fact, you can actually go and look at some of my older videos from 2013 and see how excited I was for the game, only to be incredibly disappointed. Barrow asks, what game made you hooked on the racing genre? That easily is what I would say is my first proper racing game, Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005. The A464 asks, why was the best era of racing games in the 6th and 7th gen of consoles? Now, the popular opinion seems to be that the 6th gen was the best generation, which I understand that, but personally my favorite has to be the 7th gen. Codemasters was at their peak, Forza Motorsport was at its peak, Project Gotham Racing still existed, Burnout still existed, Ridge Racer was at its peak, MotorStorm existed, and games like Need for Speed Carbon, I personally view as a 7th gen game, even though probably most of my audience views it as a PS2 or PC game. I view it as a 7th gen game because I played that game on the 360 when I was younger. Like I said earlier, the controversy around 8th gen racing games is a more complicated one because a lot of franchises died out and a lot of franchises became worse than what they were before, and we also didn't get that much new IP. So it's easy to say that 6th or 7th gen was better, but if you're asking me which one's better of the two, I'm going to say 7th gen. 6th gen definitely had more games, but I think 7th gen had higher quality games. Moji69 asks, what do you think of racing games on mobile? Is it a dead horse being beaten, or is there some diamonds in the island of trash like Grid Autosport or others? I have a video I made on mobile racing games back in 2020 that you can check out in the top right corner in the video right now. Weezer asks, Are there any racing games you're excited for this year? And to that effect, has any recent game outside of racing game genre caught your attention? I don't know what there really is to look forward to this year. There was not much announced at E3, there is no Need for Speed to be seen anywhere, and the only racing game title that I can see that's coming out later is Forza Motorsport, which I'm looking forward to, but that's coming next year. The only racing game title that seems to actually be coming out that's been announced is Forza Motorsport, which is coming out next year and not this year. In terms of non-racing games, I am looking forward to Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope. The first game was a really good strategy game. It surprised me quite a bit, and especially with how much content it had that I got for $20 with the gold edition on sale. Among licensed and composed soundtracks, which one do you prefer and why? Meaning which licensed soundtrack is best or which composed soundtrack is best? I assume you're asking which one should be in the game, licensed or composed. Depends on the game, because Forza Horizon 1 wouldn't be Forza Horizon 1 if it had a composed soundtrack. That game is all about being grounded in that time as much as possible. If Forza Horizon had original music, it wouldn't have the same effect as it does. But I wouldn't want Gran Turismo 4's classic menu music to be replaced with something licensed. There's also some franchises that have alternated between licensed and composed, or sometimes ones that were composed at first and licensed later, kind of like Burnout. Do you have any predictions or prospects for the future of racing games? Is it as bleak or bland as many would like to drone on about, or do you see some hope in future releases? That's kind of hard to tell, because with things like unannounced games or new IP, it's hard to tell. But in terms of current franchises and where they're going, from what I can tell, there's different predictions to be made. Need for Speed, I have absolutely no hope for, and I think right now is actually the darkest age of the franchise. Ghost brought back customization, and they killed pretty much everything else. Good handling, gone. Good physics, gone. Map design, gone. Cops that weren't broken, gone. A story that made sense and actually ended at the right place instead of in the middle of the game, gone. Online multiplayer, gone. An actually polished product, gone. Graphics that actually keep up with the current generation of games, gone. Graphics that are some of the best in racing games in general, gone. A great, cohesive soundtrack that's full of great tracks but also fits the game, gone. But the new Criterion seems to be having a ton of trouble, as the new Need for Speed hasn't even been announced yet. And since a new Criterion is developing on top of Need for Speed Heat, I expect many of the same issues from Ghost games to be present in the new games. The only thing that will get rid of these issues, in my opinion, is a complete rewrite of Need for Speed. The code base needs to be wiped completely. Not even a new engine, just wipe what you have other than like the car models and customization, because Need for Speed needs, not a reboot, but it needs a rewrite. It needs a refresh, something. Forza Horizon is a hard one because Horizon is still fairly polished, but Playground just doesn't seem to listen to the player base on progression. The Hot Wheels expansion actually has some really good stuff in terms of progression, but on progression in the main game and a lot of other issues in the main game, Playground just doesn't seem to acknowledge what a lot of the players complain about. And Horizon seems to be a series that is trying to go more and more toward the casual market that doesn't actually seem to play the game more than the players who do play the game, so it's kind of strange to predict the future of the Horizon franchise. Gran Turismo, like I said earlier, Polyphony seems to be doing absolutely nothing to fix the state of GT7, and the fact that it took 9 years to get a mainline title, that might just be the worst in the series, is really disappointing, and it's hard to tell whether Polyphony is going to, or will want to, fix it. Forza Motorsport, however, was stagnant during most of the Xbox One generation, and, the new creative director, Chris Sasaki, with the decision to reboot the franchise, has seemed to be a really positive thing for it. We need to see more of the game. They've really just shown us tech demos so far, but everything looks like a huge step up compared to FM7. I just need to see the progression, the car customization, and the way multiplayer works. But Forza Motorsport is the main franchise that I really have hope in. I know people will want me to talk about TDUSC, but I can't really say much about TDU at this point, because have they really shown us that much? I guess the only thing you could consider is alarming. Ashley Goodger says, I got a new car. What do I name it? Stick. Don't worry, I never forget anything. SA64 asks, what's your favorite installment in the Asphalt franchise? Asphalt, for the most part, is a series that I quite like. Despite Scott the Waz saying that it's just a mobile game that has no demand to be on console or PC, clearly people want it on those platforms for a good reason, because most of the entries in the series are actually pretty enjoyable. I started Asphalt 5 and I've played 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 5 I have a lot of nostalgia for, but I think 7 and 8 are probably the best games in the franchise. 9 is fun in its own right, but I think it really simplified the mechanics a bit much. DJ Harrison FB asks, if you were the creative director for Forza Horizon 5, what would you fix/improve and why? On my Why Forza Horizon 5 is Dead in Quotations video, I have a whole list of things that I think Playground should fix, so I would fix those. I think I would put the game's rating back to an E10+. I think Horizon 2 and 3 were at a pretty good middle ground in terms of the content, I guess censoring of music, stuff like that. I would probably get rid of wheel spins altogether because that's the #1 thing that really kills the progression of the game. I would revamp the multiplayer system to have lobbies like Forza Horizon 1, but also have it to where you can quickly matchmake. I would give the game custom configurable lobbies like Forza Horizon 1, but also an option to where if you go into a free roam lobby, you can just start races by going to them. The soundtrack would also need a complete revamp in my opinion. Ideally, I also wouldn't make the game a continuation to Horizon 4. Being in Mexico and yet everyone being British is extremely strange. I feel like I'm playing Horizon UK 1.5 almost, because while I'm in a different location, everyone you hear in game is British. And for me, I would have done a complete reset to where you're not some Horizon superstar that was already famous from Horizon UK, and you're just coming to Mexico now, but I would have rather started as a rookie, and the characters wouldn't be mostly British. It's extremely strange to, see in my real life that, there's no one British around here being right above Mexico, but yet a game that's trying to be accurate to Mexico is just full of British people. It's just one of the things that really takes the immersion out for me. And at that, I would also add more cars that are popular in Mexican car culture. The one I want most being the Super Beetle. I don't understand why this isn't in the game. If they go to Mexico to scan the skies and put in so much detail in there, why can't they find a Volkswagen Beetle to scan? So, that was about it for the Q&A today. Maybe I shouldn't be asked to do a Q&A ever again because that took way too long. I'll explain the whole footage problem I had in the comment section and pin the comment down below. But hopefully I got to answer most of the questions y'all wanted to be answered. And hopefully y'all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.